Hey everybody, I'm Catherine Sprung, and today we're going to be making a combination of two of my most favorite things, cookies and apple pie. We're doing an apple pie stuffed cookie. Delicious, I know. So let's get started. The first thing we want to do is focus on the apple pie filling part. What I like to do is use a freeze-dried apple and blend that down into a powder mixture. Why, you might ask? Well, it has an incredible shelf life, so you can keep around those freeze-dried apples whenever and then use them as needed. So here we're not going to need a ton for the filling. Our whole recipe will get about 12 cookies, give or take, depending on how big you want to make them, so maybe a little less, but I don't think too many more. So you can always start small, go along as you need. But I'm going to do just half for now because we do have some prepared so that I can show you. So I'm just going to start with 5 tablespoons right now of this powder mixture. And then we just need to rehydrate it. So we're going to get some water and just add that in. And this is really just an eyeball type of a thing, because there's so many factors. Maybe there's humidity, rain outside, and you walk outside with your bowl already and you capture it that way. So if you want to start, conservatively, you can start with, a tablespoon, and then we're just going to stir that in, and you'll very quickly be able to see, if you need more or not. Certainly here we do. So I just say little by little, just add it in until you don't have any more of that powder and it starts to look more like a really kind of a thick applesauce. So we're almost there. We've still got a little bit of that powder that's kind of still sitting on top, but we don't want it too watery either. So just a little bit. I would say we probably used somewhere around 3 tablespoons of water, 4 tablespoons of water, but this is looking pretty great. So this is kind of the consistency that we're looking for. It's kind of like a paste almost. With this, you can add some optional ground cinnamon. I highly recommend because it gives it that really warm kind of flavor from an apple pie. So we can just do a nice little dash of that in there. Mix it back up a bit. And then we're going to be portioning this out. Again, nothing in this part is an exact science. We're going to kind of eyeball it, but I will guide you as best as possible. So I'm just going to grab a glove, and I'll be able to show you too. I prepared some already, just so you could kind of see what that's supposed to look like, because we're going to be freezing these little dollops that we're going to be creating. So right here, I have some of these prepared little dollops already, and so they are solid and cold. The reason that we do that is so that they kind of maintain their form a little bit and they bake nicely once they're inside the cookie. This is going to be our stuffing. So we can, prepare some more. I would say a half a tablespoon is probably the best amount to do for these, just so they're not overstuffed, but you get just enough of that filling in there. So we can take that half a tablespoon, same one that we use, so easy on the dishes, which is great. And we'll just make it into, shape-wise, doesn't really matter, somewhere in between, like a little disc. We don't want it too crazy. Have it so that it's formed nicely. So again, just that half tablespoon, kind of roll it up into a little ball, mush it down just a little bit. And once we have all of those set, we're gonna pop them into the freezer at least for a half an hour, I would say. So this part you could always get a head start on. You can do it days in advance, totally doesn't matter. You can do it the night before and then they're ready for the next day. Or if you have a spare half hour, that's perfect. Just pop them in, and then whenever you're ready for them, which we'll walk through together, is when you can take them out. So let's see. So that 5 tablespoons got me almost 5. So I guess you can figure that however many you're going to need, you can kind of work that way. So I'm gonna take a little bit from this side, add it to this one, so that we have more evenly distributed little fillings. So these are going to go into the freezer. In the meantime, let's go ahead and start on the cookie dough. So easy, but this is my favorite cookie dough kind of recipe. I always love to use dark brown sugar for that. If you have light brown sugar, that's fine, but I think that this one has a nice depth of flavor to it. So that is what I prefer. We're going to start by creaming the butter and sugar together. So I have a cup of packed dark brown sugar. Packing is literally just kind of packing it in. You don't want it too fluffy because then you want all of that sugar nice and dense so that you can get your full serving right there. So we've got a cup of that just right go into the bowl. Going to get my butter. We're using 1 stick or a half a cup of cold butter. I recommend using cold butter when making cookie dough because I do. But truly it's the consistency. I think that it really lends better to this kind of application. So we're going to just kind of, cut it into little pads of butter here, just so that it's easier to whip when we cream the butter and the sugar. You don't need to measure it out perfectly or anything like that. I would say somewhere around, just 1/4 of an inch chunks, 1/2 inch. Again, it's not going to completely matter. It's just going to, the smaller and the more pieces that you have, the easier it's going to be to cream together. So let's go ahead and just add all of that, if we can gather them all, into the bowl. Let's lock this into place into our stand mixer with a paddle attachment, which I recommend for creaming butter and sugar. We're looking for light, airy, fluffy sugar butter mixture. So let's lock this in. Start slow to start. And I would say once everything is incorporated, then we can gradually turn up the speed a little bit so that we have everything whipping. Now that this is starting to come together, we can turn the speed up a little bit more. And we're going to let this whip for at least a couple minutes. In between, you'll want to scrape down the sides with a spatula or a spoon just to make sure that all that butter and sugar are fully combined. But you'll start to see, once it starts kind of sticking to the sides of the bowl too, that's an indicator that everything is really starting to cream and come together.
A few moments later.
We're gonna get that egg in there. Let's go ahead and just stir that in to get incorporated. We don't need to whip it nearly as long as we did for the butter and sugar, just so that everything there is combined. And then we're going to add in our dry ingredients next. So in my little cup here, I have 1 1/4 cup of all-purpose flour. With that, you want to make sure that you kind of spoon level that in so that you're not just scooping and packing it in like we did with the sugar. You want to just kind of sift that in there so it's still fluffy. Then I've got a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda and a few dashes of salt. Salt's optional as always, but I personally like adding it in there. So let's go ahead and add that in. We're gonna probably add it in about 3 rounds. I always recommend don't add everything in all at once. Let everything get incorporated. So we've got our first round in. Let's get our second round in. All right, and let's get our last bit in there. So we've got our oven preheated to 400 degrees. So while that's either heating up or ours is already ready, let's go ahead and portion this out. So I love to use these little scoopers for their cookie dough scoops. I think it kind of gets all that guesswork out of there and lets you have the most perfect amount. But if you don't have one, it doesn't matter. You can eyeball it to about the size of a golf ball, I would say. But we'll go ahead and scoop out our first scoop and just get that into your hand. Then you're going to want to flatten it out to kind of a little bit like a disc, just like that. And we'll get another one going, and this is what we're going to wrap these little apple fillings with 2 pieces. So same thing, just flatten it out, nice little disc. And we go ahead and we take one of our little fillings, just place it inside like that. We get the other one. And then just kind of pinch the corners just so we make sure that that apple filling is nice and set inside. And then what I like to do is kind of almost roll it back into kind of more like a ball shape, so it's not super flat. So we've got it like that. Let's do one more. Got our scoop there. Flatten that guy out. We'll go ahead and place one of these little fillings back inside. Set that aside while we get our second scoop. And you don't need to fill this all the way because it does allow for kind of a generous portion. So if it's a little bit empty from the cavity, totally fine. We'll flatten this one out too. And let's go ahead and cover that one up. Pinch all the corners and then just kind of work it back into a little bit of a ball of dough, just like that. These are not going to spread a ton, so I would say to place them probably about, at least a couple inches apart. The more space, the better. You can't mess up that way. I would say maybe do about 6 of these per tray. That way you just allow yourself enough space. You can do a couple trays at a time, stack them on the other racks. You can leave them as they are, or I like to add a little bit of Demerara sugar. This is that coarse kind of sugar here. This one in particular is a bourbon smoked sugar, so we're getting a little bit fancy here, but I felt that for our apple pie cookies, that bourbon, that smokiness is going to really add that extra touch of delicious. So we can just sprinkle just a little bit on the top. It also kind of mimics that sugar that's on top of a lot of those latticed apple pies. So you can double all those efforts there. Just a little sprinkle there, and then I like to just press it in to make sure that it's on there. Again, we're at 400 degrees, and what I recommend is doing about 5 minutes, check them, rotate them, and then pop them in for another 5 minutes, and then just kind of check them. You want to look for that golden brown on the outside. We don't want burnt edges, but that crispiness is good because then you're going to get that kind of like gooey center from the apple. So you want that. So we don't want to over bake them. So at 400, 5 minutes, rotate, 5 minutes, check them. We're going to do that, and I'll report back and let you know how long it took and how they turned out.
A few moments later.
Okay, so our cookies are out of the oven. Here's my report back. So I did the 5 minutes at 400, rotated 5 minutes at 400, and just to be on the extra safe side, because sometimes even though the outside will look really beautiful and golden brown, sometimes that inside is a little bit underdone. And with cookies, you can't really check. It's not like a cake where you can put in a toothpick and check and see if it comes out clean or not. So just to be on the safe side, I turned off the oven and just let them sit in there for an additional 2 minutes. So we're in this together. We're gonna see how it came out, but this is not my first rodeo, so I think that these will be absolutely fine, but we're gonna break into them so you can see all of their glory on the inside for this apple filling. So as you can see here, we've got our nice crisp brown edges, and then what we're looking for is a little bit of a softer Gruyere center. I'm gonna do this like slow reveal. I know how you guys love these break and show moments. So this is looking perfect to me. So we have our cookie here, which is nice and baked. You don't want anything that's going to be totally raw in the center. Cookie dough is still cookie dough made with, in this case, egg, so we don't want you to get sick. So here it's perfectly baked through, and then we have our apple pie filling here, which is just beautiful. It's not dried out, but we still have that slightly underbaked center around it that I think lends to just a really amazing final product. So of course, we've got to do a little bit of a taste test. We're going to do this delicately. I've been told that's the way to do things with tasting food on camera.
Nom, 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 oh, nom, nom.
I'm passing out on the inside because it's really good. This is delicious. Not just because I made it, because of the ingredients. So it does taste like an apple pie in the form of a cookie. That apple center is so crucial. It bakes in less than 12 minutes. So this is my recommendation when you want something just super comforting and to really impress whoever you're giving it to, or just yourself if you're eating it alone. Like I will probably, demolish all 6 of these in just a moment. But hope you enjoyed this recipe. Hope you enjoy the cookies, and I'll see you guys next time.